I'd say that this is not the first attempt to set up a party school or an ideological training institute. For those of you who are too young to remember, you probably would not have heard of the Ideological Institute that was based in Winneba, which was set up by the first administration under Osajofo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah to provide ideological training in socialism and also training in nationalism and patriotism for party cadres and other young professionals. It was not restricted only to party cadres. There are several people who were not party cadres who had the opportunity to attend the Ideological Institutes in Winneba. And so this is not the first attempt. The next attempt I am aware of is in 1986, and very few people know about this. In 1986, Alhaji Hudu Yahya was in charge, and for those of you who know the old Parliament House, his offices, he was ensconced in that building. And after several years of the revolution, a decision was taken to set up a cadre training school. And so a young batch of intellectuals fresh out of university were recruited to go to the Soviet Union and study. And for many of you, you don't know it, I was one of those young students who was recruited by Hudu to go and study and come back and start the cadre training school. There were 4 of us. We did a postgraduate program in Moscow at the Institute of Social Sciences. And I specialized in social psychology. And we were there for 2 years. We returned in 1988. Now, at the time we returned, the pressure from the international community for us to return to multi-party democracy had built up. And so Justice Annan was asked to lead the National Commission of Democracy to sound out Ghanaians, what kind of democracy we wanted to return to. And at the time we came back in 88, that work was full on steam. And the Council for Democracy was going around and sounding out Ghanaians. Eventually they came out with their report. And the report said that we should return to multi-party democracy. And so the idea of setting up the cadre training school was put on hold because then the constitution writing had to start. And so a consultative assembly was set up, of which our general secretary was a very active part. And it was that consultative assembly that bequeathed to us the 1992 Constitution of Ghana. And it was on the basis of that constitution that we went to elections later that year. And the National Democratic Congress, our party, was not only born, but won that election and became the first government of the Fourth Republic of Ghana. And so I've narrated all this history to show that it has taken 25 years to eventually set up this institute. The thinking was that it would be set up after we had entered multi-party democracy, but for 25 years, our party has continued without setting up this ideological and party training school. And so I want to congratulate all those who have been behind the setting up of this institute. It is a very useful institute and is going to be a source of knowledge not only to party cadres, but for people who have the ideological orientation of social democracy to gain ideas of leadership, nationalism, and patriotism. And so I'm very happy, and I want to congratulate those who have brought this idea to birth. Contrary to widespread perception, institutes like this are not institutes for indoctrinating people. The perception in the First Republic when the Ideological Institute was set up was that it was a place where people were sent to be brainwashed to become ideological robots of the governing party. But that's not the case. If you look at the curriculum of the Ideological Institute, it contained programs of leadership, how to lead in a community. Of course, it contained programs of party activism, but it also contained programs of community self-help. It contained programs of nationalism, patriotism, how to be patriotic to your country. And I believe that our curriculum is going to cover the same spread, because nationalism and patriotism have become very deficient in Ghana today. Absolutely nobody thinks about the country first. We all think about ourselves first, our families second, our parties third maybe, our communities fourth, and Ghana comes a distant fifth or sixth or even 10th. And so, if this institute not only trains cadres for the party to let them understand the ideological underpinnings of the NDC, because in 2002, as our national vice chair said, we adopted social democracy as our official party philosophy. And yet, I'm sure that if we ask, as many cadres, all over the country as possible what social democracy is, we'll get different interpretations of what social democracy is. And in many cases, most of our people are ignorant, really, what it is. And so we find that developing in our party are, tendencies that are not borne out by social democracy. Tendencies of self-interest, parochialism, lack of unity, divisiveness, undermining colleagues and cadres. These are the kinds of things that understanding the ideological underpinnings of a party will help us to avoid. And so I'll encourage as many of our activists of our party to take advantage of these courses. Aside from that, my expectation is that the party will contract the institute to go out of its established center into the regions and run courses for the party's cadres. And of course, the party has to pay the institute for running those courses. So that we can have our youth organizers in the regions, we can run a one-week course for them and teach them party youth activism, and also teach them the underpinnings of social democratic ideology. And so this is a very useful venture the party has undertaken, and I'm very appreciative of this step. I said that in one of my speeches, I said I was a left-of-center politician. And I said in Africa, if you look at the challenges we face, you cannot be any other ideology. If you look at the poverty and the challenges, you can only afford to be a left-of-center politician. And there's a wide perception that social democracy means equalizing poverty. Or the poorer you look, the more socialist you are. And I remember some of these perceptions were ingrained during the revolutionary times when we wore rubber-tie slippers and things. And so certainly we must redefine to the public mind and let them understand that social democracy does not amount to equalizing poverty. And that's one of the reasons why we need to make an analysis of the trends that are taking place in this country. Our party has contributed the most to the increase in the middle class of this country. In the period that NDC has been in office, we have seen the greatest upward movement of people from lower classes into the middle class. And yet when people get into the middle class, because of the perception that our party is social democratic and is against property owning and seeks to equalize poverty, then those same people that we have created the conditions to be upwardly mobile, drift into the property-owning classes, and therefore identify themselves with a different ideology. And so that misconception must be erased. Of course, social democracy believes in the market and creating an environment for the private sector to be able to prosper. But at the same time, we believe that the markets cannot fairly distribute the fruits of economic growth. And so you need a certain state intervention to ensure that the poor and vulnerable are also not left out. And so social democracy is about social safety nets and making sure that everybody is able to live a decent and dignified life, while letting those who are business people, who want to do business and make money, do it and make money, create employment. But when that cake has grown, how to distribute it, the market cannot distribute it fairly. And so the state must make sure that those social safety nets are put in place in order that the poor and vulnerable are not left to an undignified life. And so we must let people understand that our party is not against business. Indeed, it's in the time that our party has been in government that businesses have prospered the most. And so these redefinitions must be one of the outcomes that this institute is able to put out. Often if you go to the developed countries, when the conservatives come into power, they whittle away at social welfare. And they give tax breaks to the rich and wealthy. But in Africa, you can't whittle away at social welfare. Indeed, some of those conservative parties that call themselves conservatives, have moved left of center. And today are involved in social safety nets like national health insurance, like free school, senior high school, and others. Those are all social democratic programs. And so we must be proud of our ideological orientation, and we must redefine it so that people clear the misconception they have about social democracy, and to understand that our party seeks to ensure prosperity for all, not just for a few, and open the opportunities of this country to all our citizens instead of a few people. And so with those few words, I wish you well. I'll be participating in a unity walk in my home region tomorrow. Tamale alone can draw out millions of people to fill the streets of the whole city, so you are not required to come to Tamale to join us. We have enough people to ensure that we have a successful walk. My understanding is that the walk will be repeated in other regions. I've seen Greater Accra have already advertised this. Unfortunately, Greater Accra, I will not be here. International assignments take me out regularly. I don't know when this was instituted. It looks like the international community, when you leave office, they try to keep you busy so that the new government can have time to settle down. And so anytime you come back, they are sending you off on another mission. But it's become an occupational hazard for me. But since I'm in town, I'm going to take the opportunity to join the people of Tamale for their unity walk. And I encourage that when your regions, hold your walks, all of you take time off and go and join them. It is a walk of solidarity to show that we're one, to raise the spirits of our people. I remain a very committed member of our party. And so we wish the walk tomorrow will be successful. But with these few words, let me wish the first cohort well. As the General Secretary said, because this was the first batch, they thought that it would be useful for us to join you and solidarize with the Institute so that the Institute gets off to a good start. And so let me thank you very much and wish all of you a very successful session. Thank you.